I'm Laura Scapitici from the Anthroposophical Society in America. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining us, everybody. I'm here with Lisa Romero, and we're getting ready to start the webinar. So what I'd like to do is just find out where you are calling in from or where you're viewing from. And if you could do that and let us know in the Q&A or the chat, then we can know where people are calling in from. We've got almost 50 people on right now, so that's really great. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Strengthening Foundations of Inner Work with Lisa Romero. This is so exciting. Okay, so Q&A and chat are fine. Okay, we've got Fargo, North Dakota, Santa Cruz, California, Westford, Massachusetts, East Montpelier, Vermont, Salt Lake City, Utah. Hello, Daniel McKenzie. Hi, from Los Angeles. I guess I'm going to read some names off. Oh, so many people here. Westmoreland, New Hampshire, Lincoln, California, Maitland, Australia. Yes, we expect to see some of our Australian friends here. Philmont, New York, Yamba, Australia, Sarasota, Florida, Chicago, Illinois, Byron Bay. Hello. Dunoon, Australia, Brisbane, Australia, Olympia, Washington, Cincinnati, Ohio, Fair Oaks, California. Wow, isn't this lovely? So many people from all over the place joining us tonight for this webinar. Go ahead, keep typing them in for one more minute. Orcas Island, Washington, South Haven, Michigan. Yes, more Byron Bay. And yes, Angelic in Illinois. Is that the name of a town for real? That's pretty cool. Perth, Australia, Ghent, New York. Oh, so many friends here. Thank you everybody for joining us. And thank you, Lisa, for agreeing to offer this series with us. I feel like it's something that's really being asked for right now, this work. And I just want to introduce you very briefly and just say that your path of connection with anthroposophy started with inner work, and it's just continued like that over the last couple decades. And now you have 5 books out on inner work and contemplative practices, and many topics connected to that, and a 6th book coming out soon. So we'll make sure we let everybody know how to find you, but they can definitely find you here and in New Orleans in October. So we can talk about that a little bit more, and I'll send everyone details of that in their email. Thank you everyone for joining us from all over the world tonight. And thank you, Lisa, for bringing your knowledge and your warmth and your beautiful room with your beautiful candle and your blackboard. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Laura. And welcome to everybody from all over the place. It's coming from Australia, where we're in kind of winter, as far as winter is here. And I'm going to be attempting something that I've never done before, as many people haven't, in terms of working on a webinar. But more importantly for me, to work out if being able to give some useful instruction that's supportive to the meditative practice over the internet. It's going to be very interesting. And at the same time, I'm aware that there are many people online that are meditators and some that are very new to meditation. So I really am going to focus on not necessarily the basics, but some of the important aspects of a meditative practice that can help us to ensure that we get the most out of our meditation. But there are many reasons that people choose to do meditation and inner development. And for myself, it is connected most deeply with working in our relationship as consciously as possible to the spiritual world. That's not why everybody meditates. And so I'm going to work from this place in that sense, that understanding what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what the exercises can produce as results if we work with them. Now, yeah, this is going to be partly experiential, so I'm asking you to do a few exercises as we go, and also it'd be really interesting to hear the questions that arise and some feedback on some of the exercises, how they're working out for you. Okay. Now you can see I have with me this blackboard, And on the top it says our everyday self. Now the everyday self is what we usually refer to as ourselves, the me self. Steiner called it the workaday self. It is this part of our consciousness that we identify ourselves as a participant in the earthly world. And yet, along with Rudolf Steiner, many other teachers, all the deeper esoteric traditions, will talk about this potential second self. And often it's called the higher self, or even we talk about this second birth, the birth of the higher self. So when we're looking at a meditative practice in relationship to the spiritual world, we really are looking at how do we work towards awakening this second self. And of course, Steiner has said much about that, and I would like to read a couple of things about this higher self out of Steiner's quotes and his work. So this is from Knowledge of the Higher Worlds. For every human being bears within themselves a higher self, besides what we might call the workaday self. This higher self remains hidden until it's awakened, and each human being can themselves alone awaken the higher being within themselves. But that's quite something, because that's a new impulse comparatively to some of the older traditions. Some of the older Eastern traditions look at the guru that awakens you, the guru that, in a way, takes you from where you are to other realms of consciousness, or the Hierophant that can somewhat do it for you. And this is something that is not only new, but incredibly significant in our relationship to inner development and inner work, that we recognize that there is no guru. We really only can do this work ourselves, and that it is up to us to freely choose to awaken this relationship to the spiritual world in the consciousness that is possible. And that is really important, because this freedom is kept sacred in the sense of our inner work. Even if we hear helpful indications, we know that really the path can only be trodden by ourselves, working with the exercises, with ourselves engaging in the work. However, one of the interesting things is, in order to do genuine inner development, you already need some inner development. Now that may sound like a contradiction. And so there are certain exercises that can help us to get the ground of inner development, so that we might proceed in our own inner work and our own inner path. And part of that ground is expressed in Rudolf Steiner's work more clearly than I've found it in anywhere else, any other schools or teachings, because it really speaks of this free will, and how the will, the free individualized will, engages in the inner practice. So I want to just give an example of that and see if people can follow that with a simple exercise. Simple exercise is take a piece of cloth of the material that is in that you're wearing, say your t-shirt or your jeans or whatever it is, yes. And you're going to concentrate with your sense of touch on the quality of the cloth. Now, you're not trying to intellectualize and say, oh, the cloth is like this or it's like that, but you're just really sensing what is the quality of this cloth. Really living into the sensing of that other thing. And then move your attention to your fingers that are doing the sensing. And don't change what you're doing, because it's very important to make these experiences as clarified as possible. I didn't change what I was doing. I'm rubbing the cloth in the same way. All I've done is move my attention from the thing that I'm sensing, the cloth, to my fingers that are doing the sensing myself. I go from the cloth to myself. And what you should experience, most of you, or could experience, I should say, is that when you focus on the cloth is more illumined to you, more clear for you. And then when you turn and focus on your fingers, actually the cloth drops to the background, the fingers are more clear to you. Oh, that's interesting. Our attention on the thing, whether it is the self or the other, is going to make that stand out more clearly. But what we're looking for is not the cloth, or not my fingers are doing the sensing, not even the attention, but the will that moved the attention. Now you might have to do this again. Go into the cloth, feel the cloth, and then you're going to move your attention from the cloth into your fingers. Now see that will that does that movement, that's maybe a seed of what needs to grow and develop in order to do deep inner work. This inner will to move my own attention. Now here is the interesting thing. In the world, the cloth and even my fingers are part of the ease which gives me the ability to move the will. However, when I am going to work with this will in my inner world of thinking, there isn't this other thing, this external thing, which is in a way half the will, because it's so easy in a way. I almost don't have to. Everyone says, well, I was feeling the cloth without the will, and then I moved to my attention to my fingers. So the actual thing of the other or my own fingers is a ground of which my will can with ease move. But I'm going to attempt to take that will, that same level of free activity of moving attention, into the realms of my own inner world, into my own thinking, into my own feeling, or in fact apply it on a particular verse or mantra or inner exercise. And when you move the will from having something else in a way hold the attention as well as yourself, to having to do that all inwardly, of course we often recognize how weak our will is. Mm-hmm. And so this is a really interesting part of inner development, how to build the will to work inwardly.
Okay, so wow. That was just, you've already started us out with an amazing exercise. I want to make sure everybody's with us, so if they can just give me a yes. I don't know, I was holding my sweater and looking at my thumbs and I was like, wow, that's cool, my focus. But then you talked about the internal will and not having it just focus on these outside things. So yes, so people are saying yes. That was really amazing, and that was in the first like 4 minutes. So thank you for bringing it. Yes. Okay, great. Yes, people are saying yes, yes, yes. Beautiful. I didn't want you to move on yet because I'm still experiencing it. Sure. Thank you. That's perfect. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, so this is actually quite significant. In a way, you need that free, individualized will to really apply to your own inner world. And in a certain sense, this dualized world of self and other helps us to awaken to this free will. And yet we've got to crystallize that or enhance that so that when we work inwardly, we're able to make sure that whatever we're doing, that will is there present. Because we're very clever. We can, for instance, do concentration exercises and a shopping list at the same time. Not, of course, if we're applying that will. Verses become memories for us that really can run themselves in our mind. And when we run a verse, more radiant than the sun, purer than the snow, finer than the ether is the self, spirit in my heart, I am that self am I, it doesn't do inner work.
Right.
The inner work arises from us actually having that engaged will, where we take a verse and we are able to bring it as the center of our inner world, and nothing else is existing, which requires a level of attention, observation, free will, to bring everything together so that that's the center of our thinking, feeling and willing. So we need some free will even to do inner development well. But interestingly, we have it, we just need to build it. And participating in inner development is actually what does build it. So I want to look at what we're trying to build, and then we can actually work with a verse, because this is significant. On one hand, we're trying to develop this free will so that it feels strengthened, and that you, in a way, have a certain amount of self-control where you can direct your own thinking. You can stay submerged in a thought, that you can make that the center of the soul content without having your thinking or your feeling disappearing somewhere else. So that's one aspect of inner development. And part of the way that we do that is by putting our willing actually into our thinking itself, or by putting our thinking into our will. But the first exercise, I'm going to activate my will into my thinking, in a sense. That develops greater free will. But we also need to be able to put our will into our thinking. So from our everyday self, our thinking, feeling and willing is usually full of other stuff that the sense world can produce for us. But even if it isn't producing it in this moment, we've got all of the indoctrinations, all of the conditioning, everything that's in our inner life that is filling the content of our thinking, feeling and willing. Our thinking, feeling and willing is full of the content of the sense world. And so when we move to this inner world, we actually don't want to fill it with the content of the sense world. We actually want to bring ourselves engaged with something of the higher worlds. Now, it is true that you could meditate on anything to strengthen your will, but you can't meditate on anything to have a relationship to the higher worlds. I want to read this from Rudolf Steiner. Let us make it clear to ourselves what is really brought about by meditation. Streams of spiritual life are always flowing through the world. These streams can't flow into us when we are thinking about everyday things, but our meditations are like portals that lead to the spiritual world.
It's beautiful.
So sometimes people say any thought exercise, anything will do. But there are reasons why we take on particular thoughts that Rudolf Steiner says come out of the esoteric school, come from the masters of wisdom. They're not made up by somebody, but they actually reflect deeply on the path of inner development and begin to cultivate the soul that is usually full and bound with all of these thoughts, feelings, experiences of the sense world, and cultivate a new relationship to things that are not of the sense-born nature. And so we take into our inner life words, thoughts, experiences that are beginning to develop us, not so that we can be full of more content, but actually we can move from content to a capacity. The first capacity is greater free will. How important is that?
So can you say that once again? So it's not about more content. It's about moving from content to
capacity.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move to that in my little board here. I don't know if you see that clearly.
Just a little bit more.
You got that?
Yeah, there we go. That's good.
Okay.
Yes, great.
So I want to develop my free will, but I also need to work with the observer. Now, this is an interesting thing, because if you are your own teacher, which you are, your higher self being what Steiner called your one and true only guide, then you need to be able to evaluate your own inner world. You need to be able to look upon yourself. And there are many reasons for that. One reason is that if we are subjective to all of our experiences, if our everyday self is just involved in the meditative practice, not only will it create maneuvers to give us more different content, it won't really allow us to begin to move from our everyday self towards the higher self, the higher development. But the development path is a movement towards the higher self. So the observer, or some people call it the witness, is brought in by being able to look upon ourselves. And this is the other aspect of inner development that we can achieve. And I want to now to do another exercise for us to experience that. Some people that meditate will find this quite quickly brings about the observer. And for others, it may just give us a glimpse of recognizing that I can look upon myself. These exercises are given through knowledge of the higher worlds, and Rudolf Steiner spoke about these in various ways. And it's interesting to note that many people are attracted to these exercises outside of anthroposophy through the relationship to something like mindfulness. Mindfulness exercises create an experience of the observer. I can look upon myself. But in the anthroposophical inner development path, we don't just want to develop the observer. We also, very importantly, want to engage, develop, grow this individualized free will. That doesn't exclude the observer that can look upon oneself. So I just want to do a simple exercise about that. This exercise, I call it Is This I? And what we're going to do now is just do a simple meditation. It's not meditation, but a contemplation exercise, where I'm going to ask you to focus on something. And in the focusing on that thing, you will be able to experience the part of you that's watching and the part of you that is having the experience. Let's do it, and maybe it makes more sense that way.
Great.
So everyone's sitting comfortably. Often when you're about to do inner development exercises, it's very useful to close your eyes so that you can be more attentive to the inner space and less distracted. But if you can meditate with your eyes open, you can leave your eyes open also. Who is right for you? So, experiencing the pressure of your body against the chair. Now, this is where you just place your attention on the thing I've said. And I'm going to ask this question, is this I? It's not for you to answer it, but the question, is this I, is to engage the observer. Observing the raising and falling of the breath. Is this I? Being aware of any sensations within the body. Is this I? And anything that appears to be distracting you, just bring your attention to it and look at it. And of course, we could do this for a couple of minutes, but what it does for us is it recognizes that if I'm the one that's looking, I can observe it. So here I have an observer, I have an onlooker, and I have the thing. That thing could be my thoughts. That thing could be my body. That thing could be feelings. But I can look upon myself. So the observer is a very important aspect in the inner development path. We need to have this will that can engage deeply where we want to place our own thinking and feeling at any given time. But we also need to have this ability to have this onlooker. In a way, you can see here now, as Steiner gave that image, the thinking is now in the will. Now I am putting the thinking in the will. Before I was putting the will in the thinking. And so these two aspects are worked at the same time. But of course, we can also work the thinking into the feeling. So now as an onlooker, which is very important, you'll get to see why having this observer is useful. I am going to watch my own inner world whilst my own inner world has different experiences. So here's another exercise.
Great.
This exercise is also given in Knowledge of the Higher Worlds. You close your eyes and you're going to imagine on the east the rising sun, this vibrant rising sun. Now, your imagination should not just stay as a thought, but your inner world could begin to move and feel differently, because the center of my inner world is this vibrant rising sun. How can we compare that my inner world has begun to move? I can do that by actually now imagining the rising moon in a dark, starlit night. And again, I think it, but I experience it. You see how the onlooker can actually see that there's a difference in my inner activity. My inner activity when I think, feel the rising sun is different than when I think, feel the rising moon. Now, Steiner gave that exercise in the living, dying plant as well. When we look at a living, flourishing, growing plant, a dying, decaying plant, there is a different activity in us. And that soul experiencing actually really evolves out of two places. One, having the will to really inwardly bring your attention, your focus on the thing you're trying to experience. So you have to have will to bring that sunrise into your inner world. But you also have to have the observer self watching your own soul going through this change when there is a rising sun experience compared to when there is a rising moon experience. How did everyone go with the exercise? Do you want to check it?
Yeah, if you want to type in what that was like for you, it's into the Q&A or the chat, that would be great. Yeah. Someone said fine. It was fine. It's probably a little hard to describe. Can people describe it a little bit?
as long as we've got it.
I had an experience. Yeah, I think I wouldn't have noticed.
Yeah, here we see. I've just read there. Someone said it was warming, then it was cool.
Right.
It's interesting. You see these. That's
There you go.
extraordinary. Here you have your experience in soul. But
Mhm.
how do you ensure that you're not just subjectively doing something? The
Mhm.
observer. The observer's looking upon.
Mhm. That's great.
Yeah, did
Notice
that
a change
explain?
in emotional mood. That's right. Yes.
But can you see how actually potent that is? More
Yeah.
energetic than cool and peaceful. Fantastic. Isn't that extraordinary to see the
Mm.
power that you have in your inner life? Now, interestingly enough, another difference between some of the other traditions and anthroposophy is that there is a great regard for the sense world. Like the sense world is going to allow us to have these experiences, and behind the appearance of things, the sun, the moon, all of the external world, is something more than what we see. Of course, we can look at this sun
Mm.
with our intellect and go, "Wow, it's it's quite nice. There's a little bit more purple on the right. It would make it even better." And we can look at the sun in that way. But we can also recognize that because we're a participant of this sense world, we have this ability to experience the world. And the experience tells us something other than what we perceive. It actually gives us a deep, rich encounter with the quality of the thing or the consciousness of the thing that we are observing. But it becomes more active for us in our inner development if we're able to now, as we go towards working with a verse, not only think it, but experience it. So it is not just the thought of the verse alone, but my soul's activity with engaging with the lines of the verse or the verse as a whole. Because it is these verses that are not just trying to give us new content for our everyday self, so that we go, isn't that nice? That we've got a higher self, but actually the verse itself can help us to develop these capacities, the capacity of the observer, the capacity of free individualized will, and the capacity of the experiencing soul, which is engaging intimately with the world around us. And of course, all of that applied to the inner world develops these capacities. Anyone that meditates will in time develop a greater observer witness self. They will in time develop greater free will. And of course, their experience in soul will become more and more clarified for them, so that when they look upon certain things, they will have deeper experiences because of it. And of course, that's not always easy in a world where there is untruth and error to have deeper experiences. But it is clarifying to be able to recognize not just the superficial of life, but what's living behind what's appearing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
Does anyone have any particular questions before we go on?
Give people a minute here. I was thinking this observer witness self must be also connected to equanimity.
Well, in the sense that with the equanimity, you're able to experience the soul without being drawn in that way,
Right.
and going on the roller coaster of your own feeling life.
Yes. Do you
So
see
it's
the
not
question? Oh yeah, sorry. So I thought you saw it, so I'm sorry. So yeah, so it's not you're not on the roller coaster. And you're saying that you might experience it even more deeply, in fact, but you're not going to be on the roller coaster.
You can observe it, and then you
Right.
can observe what your experiencing soul is responding to.
Right.
And that gives you a whole nother experience than actually being that feeling that is being moved around by things.
That would be helpful. Okay. So Susan has a question here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's not Susan, it's Emily. Emily, what was the difference in quality between thinking to willing and willing to thinking? Could you say that one more time?
So when I put my thinking upon my will, so I can immediately, my consciousness, now thinking is not the content of your thinking on the will. It is your capacity of thinking, your observer upon the will. So when I say, is this I, the pressure of my body against the chair, that's one explanation of it. So I am bringing the attention of the observer and experiencing that upon the will. Of course, that increases the observer. Now, you can also bring your thinking into your willing when you think something through with clarity and then act upon it. But in the exercises, we're not talking about content upon the will, but the capacity of thought upon the will. And the capacity, of course, is to be able to have attention and to look upon. So that capacity of thought, not the content of thought. And that will produce a greater experience of the observer. With the will, the free will, I've got to have that part of me that is actually really totally engaged in the present and willing what I want to have as the center of my soul life, which is willing the thought. And in that, the free will grows. Now, this will get clearer for you when we attempt to do the verse. But before we do that, I want to do a couple more exercises around the experiencing soul, as well as answer any questions that are coming up.
Yeah, so I think we can come back to some of these. Why don't you keep going? And then I think some of the answers will come through the next thing, as you're saying. Great. Thank you. Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Yeah, so I asked everybody to bring a candle into their space. And as you can see, I've also got a candle here.
And I've got a candle too.
Great. So with this exercise, just to observe now how these processes work together, we're going to look upon the candle that's a light in our room and watch what takes place in our inner experience when we look upon a present lit flame. And then we're going to look upon the flame that's in the screen and what takes place in my inner world when I look upon the flame in the screen. So, and then you can go back. You see how the experiencing soul. Now this is really important, the reason why we need the observer, because if your experiencing soul is a part of your everyday self-activity, which for a lot of people it is, then we can have a lot of sympathy, antipathy, liking and disliking, instead of clarification of our observations. So you go, oh, I like that. It's so much nicer to me. Oh, that's disgusting. Those sorts of responses are not actually what the experiencing soul is for. The experiencing soul is so that you have a recognition of how the world moves the inner world, and also that we can get a little bit more of this clarity for ourselves the difference of things. But isn't that quite something? There I am with a living flame, and here I have a technological flame. What a difference. What a difference to the inner world. Yeah. And so it's actually very important to do these exercises, because we can understand then why Ward of Education, for instance, is trying to guard the child from being too involved with the screen, because the screen does something very different for the development and the cultivation of the soul life than the living experience.
Thank you. Yeah, it's such a different experience.
Yeah.
And you said it's how the world, oh my gosh, how the world affects our inner life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we are taking something that is external. We can see these are experiments. But when we come to inner development, every verse affects your inner world differently. If you're doing a verse and it's exactly the same, regardless what verse you're doing, then you're probably not working with enough will, with enough observation and enough experience in soul. However, as I said, to get these capacities, the capacity of the observer, the experience in soul and the free will, the exercises themselves will help us get there. But how do we make sure that we're getting the most out of the exercise? First off, engage your will. The will to be so present in it that nothing else enters your inner space except for what you yourself have placed there. Now, of course, we could say that, therefore, any meditation will develop this. Some people, and this is quite a fad at the moment in anthroposophy, say, no, there's no form you can meditate on anything. And that's happening in other streams. In fact, even with the realm of magic, they've got a new term called chaos magic. Chaos magic means you don't have to follow a system, you don't have to follow certain deities, certain inscriptions, certain colours, certain forms. You can just do whatever you want at the time, whatever feels right. And yet, there is a reason for the path to have a certain direction, because we really need to awaken our relationship to the spirit. And we do so through awakening our relationship to the higher I. Now, the higher I, of course, can work through the capacities of the free will, the observer, and the experiencing, but it has so in relationship to spiritual life. And I just want to read this from the Steiner, because it's a necessity not to just do exercises that strengthen me. Mindfulness, for instance, is becoming so popular that it's going on in the Houses of Parliament. But mindfulness does not require that you have any relationship to the spiritual world. In fact, there's books out called Mindfulness and Money Making, Mindfulness and the Stock Exchange. So there are many inner development exercises that will lead you to experiencing greater self-control, greater self-reliance. And the great temptation here is the level of egotism that can arise from that. The path of inner development walks a tightrope of possible egotism, because you will feel these capacities growing in you. But why do we do it? I want to read this from the Steiner. Humanity must become a partaker of the spirit in order to carry its revelations into the physical world. Human beings transform the earth by implanting in it what they have ascertained in the spiritual world. That is their task. It is only because the physical world is dependent upon the spiritual, and because human beings can work upon the earth in the true sense only if they are participators in those worlds in which the creative forces lie concealed. Now, that's something. Only if we are participators in those worlds in which the creative forces lie concealed. Only for these reasons should we desire to ascend to the higher worlds. Move into the higher worlds, move into a relationship with the spiritual world is the purpose of inner development as given through this path to help serve humanity. In fact, that's one of Rudolf Steiner's great gifts to us. We can do nothing more helpful for the world's further evolution than to evolve ourselves. This is something, in fact, we must do. And we have no doubt whatsoever, the moment we perceive the truth about our own nature and its relationship to the wider world. If I become stronger in my observing free will experiencing, but I want to do all that for me, for my personal gain, for my personal wealth, then we are not working towards the higher. And yet that is the temptation that lays in front of everybody today. The path in the development must be taken, but why do we take it? So working towards the higher worlds, and I'm going to give you another list here, to the higher self. Now, Steiner gave these words, which is interesting to think about it, not the observer, but the faithful observer. What's the difference between having an observer that can look upon and the faithful observer that is actually looking for the spirit, looking for spiritual reality? The observer can bring us into aloofness, can actually separate us out from this world. The faithful observer is seeking more connection with the spiritual world. Now that can be difficult because, we've been indoctrinated in our everyday self into a blind faith. Blind faith doesn't have a place in the inner development path. But faithful observer, the awakened faith, that is essential actually, that I'm not just a cold, aloof onlooker to the world and myself, but I'm seeking the spirit in things.
I just want everyone to know that they will get information about the quotes and what's on the blackboard right now.
Absolutely.
That build up to the faithful observer and the difference between is really...
Yes, this is really important. And of course, if we had face-to-face time, we would be able to look more clearly at the difference between the observer and the faithful observer. However, you can try that. What is the difference when I just look upon this candle, just as it is, as a flame, and then I look upon it with a recognition that it is something more than just a flame. Something is alive in this. Something beyond what I can perceive with my senses also is there. Streams of spirit flowing through the world. Now I want to do another exercise while we can, and this exercise is to also show again that the experiencing self isn't to make judgments of good, bad, right, wrong. The experiencing self is to recognize what part of my own inner life is being engaged by certain things, experiences. And this is important because you are your own teacher. You have to take yourself through this path, and it's also important that you can, out of yourself, evaluate what is needed for your own inner development, but also evaluate the effects of things upon your soul. And, you know, it's here that we need a certain amount of honesty, because sometimes we like to say things are good because I like them and enjoy them, rather than, oh, I experience what part of me is being tugged at with this particular event. So I have a colleague here that is going to sing a couple of songs. Now, the best way for us to be prepared to do this is to just to be an observer of what effects take place in my own inner activity with the two songs that are sung. You're not trying to say one's good, one's bad. You're not trying to evaluate the nature of the singing. It's not about, it's just let it move you, but see what part of me is being moved. Is there a difference in different types of songs of the activity that takes place in me? Okay, so let's hear the first song and then we'll hear the second song. So you might want to close your eyes, observe your inner world. How is it responding to these two different kinds of song? Not right or wrong, just experience. Oh. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. And then the second song. Long ago, and oh so far away, I fell in love with you. Before the second show, your guitar, it sounds so sweet and clean, but you're not really here. It's just the radio. Don't you remember you told me you loved me, baby? You said you'd be coming back this way again, maybe. Well, baby, 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 oh, baby, I love you. I really do.
Thank you. That was amazing.
Okay. It's actually, yeah, so again, we're using our inner world as an instrument of ability to engage with the world around us. Now, we're not using scientific instruments outside of ourselves. We're not using even outer phenomena. We're actually working with what takes place inwardly in this inner phenomena. So now we're aware of this power of this inner experiencing world, not liking, disliking, but just as a way of really helping us to develop a maturation process from our everyday self, field of preferences, towards the higher self. So maybe we could have the verse now, just for the, have you got that verse that you want to pop up, Laura?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I'm not sure if I can pop that up. Let's see. Give me just one moment.
Sure.
My apologies. I should have it in one moment.
I can speak the verse.
Yes, and then I'll pull it up while you're speaking it. That's great.
Yeah. So then there are many verses that are given, and there are many mantras, and they all actually have effects. But one of the archetypal verses actually directs us towards the higher I. In the engaging with it, in the immersing ourselves in not only the thoughts, but the experiencing, and of course requires our will, then we can, there it is, in these thoughts, but also in the experience, our inner world is beginning to become attuned to the spiritual streams. And the first spiritual stream is that of our own higher I. Now, when we take this inwardly, meditatively, more radiant than the sun, has a different inner experience than purer than the snow, which has a different inner experience and finer than the ether. And of course, the words "is the self" resound very differently. So this verse, if those of you are interested in doing so, we have almost run out of time today. But if you're able to take this verse, take this will to really have this as the center of your inner life, allow yourself to go through not just the thought, but the experience of each line of the verse, and you're able to work with this over the next couple of weeks, then when we meet again, we can take this further and we can really step towards how do we strengthen our meditation? How do we get the most out of our meditation? How do we understand what we're doing and why we're doing it?
Great.
So we will make sure everybody has this verse sent to them.
Yes.
But remember, we're engaging with this so that our entire inner world is living with this verse. It's a living experience. We're not just trying to feel content. My thinking can know this verse, more radiant than the sun, pure than the snow. I can know this verse in the content of my everyday self, but I want to engage with it. I want to experience these capacities at work right in the essence of my meditative practice. Now, I think we've only got a minute left, but I would like to end with a quote from Rudolf Steiner. Nothing but the will to lead life in a spiritual way, the will to allow spiritual decisions, spiritual motivations to play a part in what we do in the physical world, can make humanity truly healthy again. Inner development has a purpose.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was incredible. Wow. I'm sure everyone else is just having this experience of it, the waves of it. Thank you so much.
I'm really interested in some feedback of whether the exercise, whether it can be conveyed over the line and whether the exercises were of use. And I look forward to our next session and taking that further.
Yeah.
Now, if you wish to contact me, you can email me at innerworkpath.com. Go onto the website. There you'll find all the meditative courses I'm doing in Australia and in the US. But it's also a place where you can then send anything that is in relationship to our next time. You can send me some questions. You might want to give some feedback about how this went over the internet. And yeah, I look forward to tuning in with some of you next in 2 weeks' time.
That's great. And folks, you can email me too, and I can pass it on to Lisa as well.
Right.
And Inner Work Path is the website, and you will have a few hours, more than a few hours, face-to-face with people in New Orleans, if anybody.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, wow, I'm glad I'm going to New Orleans. I mean, obviously I'm going to New Orleans.
It is quite interesting to see the difference. What would be the difference? Yeah.
Yeah, face-to-face.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, so much for being here with us. And I just wanted to say we had someone here from Chile, too. So,
oh, wonderful.
Yeah, Chile. I'm sorry.
Chile. Chile.
Yeah, Chile. So anyway, thank you everybody for being here. And if we didn't answer your questions, please email them to me and I will pass them on to Lisa.
Yeah, feel free to email them to innerworkpath.com or go to the website and then follow the links to email.
Perfect.
Thank you very
We'll
much.
see you in a few weeks. Okay,
Bye now.
2 weeks.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. Bye.